Welcome, everyone. I'd like to thank you again for volunteering to be a part of this and giving up some of your own time to kind of help put together some information for the board and provide some guidance for them. For those that don't know me, I'm Mitch Rainwright. I'm the superintendent of the school district. And maybe to get started, normally it's always really good to be in person for these meetings, but under these circumstances, I felt the Zoom meeting was probably a little bit more appropriate. So I will call on you individually, and then if you would just unmute yourself and kind of introduce yourself and kind of what your connection is to the school, whether you have children, elementary, middle, or high, or some of you maybe in multiple areas, and then whether or not your child is virtual, all virtual, or in a hybrid model. So we'll kind of get started with some introductions that way, and I'll just kind of go around my screen as I see people, depending on what view you have. Either the speaker is large screen in front of you, or the yellow box shows up around the speaker at that time. Mr. Carey, why don't you get us started?
All right, those that have Zoom meet, the easiest thing is to hit the space bar to talk, just so you know. You can also click on mute, but if you hold on the space bar, it works pretty well. I'm Kyle Carey, the tech ed teacher at the high school. I also co-teach at the middle school level. For this meeting, I'm gonna do my best to give my position as a teacher and staff member, more so than the parent, even though I do have a middle school 8th grader as well as a 5th grader that are both doing the hybrid model.
Thank you. Jody.
Hi, I'm Jody Hannick. My son Blaine is in 1st grade in the elementary school doing the hybrid model this year.
Annika.
Hi, everyone. I'm Annika Swenson, and I have a daughter, Haven, who is a kindergartner, and she is all virtual.
Justin. Need to unmute yourself, Justin.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. Sorry about that. So, hi, Justin Skelding. My wife and I have a daughter named Harper, and she will be in 4K this year, doing a hybrid model, I believe. Christy just confirmed.
Thank you. Dr. Fox.
Yep.
Hi, I have 3 kids in the district, 6th grader, an 8th grader, and an 11th grader. And I also am a family doctor in Mineral Point and have been serving on our Upland Hills Health incident command team for COVID. So have been involved in this since March in terms of the county response and our primary care response to COVID.
Matthew.
Hi, my name is Matthew Ganinin, and I am an 8th grader student, and I am doing the hybrid model this year.
Erica.
Hi, my name is Erica Brunson. I have 3 kids in the district. I have a son in 3rd grade, a daughter in 2nd, and another daughter in kindergarten.
Bob?
I was trying the space bar, Kyle. It didn't seem to work. Maybe I didn't hit it long enough, huh? Anyway, I'm Bob Oberhauser. I have a daughter that's a senior, doing the hybrid model, and I think I joined just to kind of get a feel for what's going on. The emails that you sent out were pretty useful, Mitch. Just kind of get a better insight into what the school is doing and the plans of what we're going to do in the future, I guess.
Thank you. Gina.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. That didn't work for me either. Anyway, I'm Gina Docknell. I am a parent of 4 kids in the district. I have an 8th grader, a 7th grader, a 5th grader, and a 2nd grader. I have also done some subbing in the elementary school, but I guess I'm on here just mainly as a parent, trying to help out.
Mr. Austin.
I'm Matt Austin. I'm the high school principal. I'm looking forward to seeing what everybody's kind of got here, but thank you all for joining. I appreciate it.
Amy?
Hi, I'm Amy Tibbetts. I am also a healthcare provider. I'm a physician assistant in Darlington. And I have been involved with our COVID response as well, similar to Dr. Fox. I have 2 kids in the district. I have a 5th grader and a 3rd grader, and we're doing the hybrid model.
Thank you. Maggie.
My name is Maggie Tucker. If I hold down the mute button, it temporarily unmutes. That's a pretty cool tool. Thank you for that. I have a 4th grader I have a 4th grader who's doing virtual only.
Okay, thank you. Jane?
Hi, my name is Jane Lindsay, and I'm the school nurse this year. And I've got 4 kids, 3 in the district right now. I have a 4th grader, a 2nd grader.
I'm just going to cut in there. Is her audio good for everybody else's? I had a difficulty getting it.
No, you were breaking up quite a bit, Jane, while you were trying to introduce yourself.
Sorry, I'll go again. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Jane Lindsay. I am the new school nurse for the district. And I have 4 kids, 3 in the district right now. We've got a 4th grader, a 2nd grader, and a pre-care.
Thank you. Aaron.
My name is Aaron James. I have a daughter, Ella, is a freshman, and just glad to be a part of this committee, see we can help things out.
And I'm not sure who Steph is, since there's no image, but
my name is Stephanie Camp. I'm just listening in. I was one of the candidates and a concerned parent. I have a 4th grader who is in special education, and I'm a single parent, and this has been very, very, very difficult.
Thank you. Well, part of if you're kind of wondering how and why, we're short really one committee member. The board had given a direction to have 1 staff member, at least one parent that their student was 100% virtual, a parent that had a child at least in each of the levels, so an elementary, middle, and high school, a healthcare provider. Probably the most intelligent was the 1 student that needed to be on. So through the application process, Nate Chambers, the president of the school board, and I went through the list, tried to make sure we had all of those areas covered in representation when it came to trying to put the team together. And the 1 person is a community member that does not have any children in the school system at this point in time. And we had reached out to a couple people that we have heard from in the past in the community, but we're not interested in being part of the committee. So we're trying to reach out and find someone that will fill that need. I don't know if you all saw board meeting where we had a couple community members come and speak, and we're very, I guess, kind of got right to the heart of the matter that the school district is kind of the center of the community, and there is such great support from the community that the board felt it would be important to get somebody that can speak to that. And, how does the community feel, or, be able to kind of tap into some of that information and report back to the committee on what they're hearing as well. So we're still working on trying to get that last member of the team to commit. So if you have any recommendations, by all means, send me an email and I will reach out to those people to see if they would be interested in serving and advising. So if I show you the agenda, I'll now put that kind of in the center of your screen. So we've kind of gone through the reopening, what the committee is, and kind of you have a copy of the welcome letter, and on the back side of the welcome letter are the committee members that are present tonight. So moving to the next agenda item, the potential timeline for the reopening plan, the board most often puts a deadline on an ad hoc committee. We want the committee to meet for 3 months, gather this information and report back. And at the board meeting, when they decided they were going to form the committee, they knew that it was going to be ongoing. As we move through this process, my hope, I know Mr. Austin's hope, probably every employee of the district's hope, is that the numbers go in the right direction, that the health care and the health and well-being of our students and community go in the right direction, where we can move to adding more groups of students to get back to all students back in the building, versus the opposite, where there is an outbreak and we have to go 100% virtual. But the timeline is that this will be ongoing. The board did not put a deadline or an end date for the work of the committee. So to say that it will be 3 months, 6 months, a year, I don't know. I don't have that information that I can share with you at this time. But please know that the board values your input and respects the work that you're about to undertake. Number 3, the charge of the reopening committee. That is on the agenda that I sent out to you. I'll try to quickly read through that. The board approved an ad hoc committee to study the district virtual learning opportunities and maximize safety and academic performance. The committee will make related recommendations to the board, and the district recommends the approval of this committee. They did so at the last board meeting. The board expects the committee to produce a recommendation to the board for addressing the potential for the safe return of all students into the school buildings and monitor virtual learning experience. The board recommends the committee's role be advisory, researching issues, evaluating options to formulate a recommendation based on local pandemic metrics, and the board recommends monthly progress reports during the health pandemic. Notice that the committees are subject to the Wisconsin Open Meetings Law, and that the records of the committee are subject to possible public inspection to the extent provided by the Public Records Law. So you are an extension of the board at this point in time. And I would tap Maggie Tucker to maybe talk a little bit about this, because I know Maggie was on the last ad hoc committee that the board had put together in terms of the elementary building, and maybe you might want to share some insights as to how that committee worked and your feelings on that work, Maggie.
Yeah, I can share some information. It was a more, there was obviously a more finite timeline because it was part of the referendum that we ended up going to in a couple falls ago. It was a group of community members, just like this, a variety of staff, parents, non-parents, former teachers, staff members. I think I already said that one. We worked with an architecture firm and the former superintendent to gather information, facts. We used surveys to get information from the community and put together a report for the board that the board then took action on. So it was I think it alleviated some work because the board meetings can go on pretty long, and I think it alleviated some of the research side and opinion getting side, which was really helpful. I can see that that would be useful in this arena as well. Yeah, I don't know if you have any other questions.
No, that's perfect. Thank you. For a little bit of background information, I have been meeting with Iowa County Health Department once a week, Wednesday mornings through Zoom, and it's some of the school nurses that are in different schools that are Iowa County, the superintendents, any other school staff members that wish to be a part of that. So we've been getting a lot of our information and data from Iowa County Health. What I have on the screen is their most recent metrics. So once a week, they will compile information and send it out to those of us that have been meeting on this weekly basis. Iowa County has a dashboard that they have put together that kind of spells out information, kind of gives it a green, yellow, or red indicator as to how they feel things are going, based on our specific data. And what I would draw your attention to is kind of the numbers that are on page 2 for anybody that has that information. Otherwise, it's on the screen. And it kind of shows some of the areas that Debbie Sigenthaler, who is the Iowa County nurse, runs these meetings along with Keith Hurlbert, Iowa County Emergency Management. And we kind of go over these numbers on a weekly basis. And so you can kind of see they've given a little bit of a history starting back in July, on July 20th up until August 24th. And you see kind of those numbers jumping around from positivity rate. Fortunately, this last week, there has been a little decline, and average cases reported each day has gone from less than 1 to 1 to 2.5, and it's kind of so on and so forth. The daily average testing, that means the number of tests that they're doing per day. So that has kind of stayed relatively steady, above 30. They have some goals of their own that they put in place, and kind of their outbreaks, they want less than 2. So right now, their county has indicated that is red because they're above that. And then the bottom number, community spread, and that is the percentage of positive cases that the individual does not know how they got the virus. So it started at 46, then dropped, and then has kind of been a little bit of a roller coaster. Last week, 54% of the cases did not know where they came in contact with somebody that had the virus, and now it's kind of dropped back off. So that's kind of the weekly information that gets sent out to me, and I would imagine Jane has now been designated as the school's kind of point person for a lot of the health needs or health information. So Jane Lindsay will start getting some of this stuff as well. So that's kind of what some of that information is.
So Mitch, does Iowa County track like inventory of PPE that they have, or no?
Iowa County tracks that basically kind of the availability, and Dr. Fox may speak to this because I know she's part of this as well, through the hospitals. What's the capacity of the hospitals to take cases that come in that are virus that require ventilation, require hospitalization and things like that. So there is an indicator that talks about that. The Iowa County Emergency Management has PPEs on hand. It can still get access to them. We, as a matter of fact, received a lot of masks from a procurement from Iowa County, and he was giving them out to cut the schools in the county. So providing at least a mask for every student and staff member, at least 5 masks for every staff and student member in the schools. So he kind of keeps track of some of that information. So yes, they do kind of monitor availability of those materials as well.
And I will just speak to that for, so Upland Hills Health is the only hospital in the county, so it's a little easier to track in Iowa County than it is in some of the other surrounding counties that have more than one hospital. So we are required to report to the county every Monday whether we have any shortages of PPE or difficulty with healthcare provider outages or things like that, staff shortages. What the requirement is, whether we have at least if we have any shortages of less than 14-day supply of any PPE, that's what's reported on the dashboard. We're tracking it closely, and what I'll say is that we're seeing the supply chains start to tighten up quite a bit. So while we have much more than 14 days of masks and things like that, we are starting to see our numbers dwindle of how much we're able to get in when we order. So while it's tracked as that 14-day, it's tracked much closer on the institutional level. And we're also in a conservation mode. So we're all trying to use those masks as long as possible so that we're not getting shorted.
Okay, I was just curious. So I work for Exact Sciences as a supply chain manager, so I know firsthand all the constraints that we're running into. So I just wanted to lend support if we are seeing risks in PPE, that we can use some of our supply chain leverage to help out.
We should probably chat afterwards. That would be a great conversation.
Okay.
And I guess
I was wondering if anybody on the call knows what the testing daily average goal for Iowa County is.
So our goal on the Upland Hills side for our incident command is to do greater than 100 tests per 100,000 population per day. So I think we're above that goal. We're doing good on that. So we're testing at this point. If we do 50 tests a day, we know we're meeting that goal for sure.
I have pulled up the Iowa County website. So it's iowacounty.org. And if you go to the bottom of that page, there's a COVID-19 button that will take you out to their dashboard. And there they kind of spell it out. So the information that was on page 2 of the Iowa County metrics, they're pulling from here. So the top you see is the positivity rate and the kind of what their goals are. So you see the 4th one down is testing. They're wanting to do at least 35 tests per day on an average of 14 days, so over 2 weeks. And right now that number's at 53. So the iowacounty.org, and at the bottom of that website or bottom of that homepage is the COVID tab, and we'll take you to some of this information. And it's a good time for you to pause too. My intention is not to do all the talking tonight. So if you have questions, by all means, please ask. And if I don't have an answer, we'll certainly get that down and try to get the answers to those questions. So another resource that we have just recently received is this information came from Iowa County. And basically, this is the most recent information we received from them, talking about kind of how they would look for the schools to respond in the incident that someone is coming presenting symptoms of COVID-19, and kind of has given us some more guidelines. Recently, the Wisconsin Department of Health had put some information out not a lot of metrics to it. So Iowa County has tried to put more information together that helps give schools some more direction on how for us to best respond. And then the last piece that is part of that is kind of the, would Iowa County ever come in and say, you can continue with in person, you should continue with hybrid, or you need to go all virtual. And this is kind of their decision tree that they had shared with us just this week. And you can look at some of that information and kind of use that, for whatever you see necessary, just more places that we look to get that kind of information. So as we look to move forward here, I'm trying to think, what kind of information as a committee do you think would be useful for us to provide, or, questions for us to run down to get ready for any subsequent meetings?
Mitch, last night I was talking to Pete Swenson. He's, I believe, a science teacher at Sugar River. And they're just on the border of Dane County. So they were planning on going hybrid up until, obviously, recently that they weren't able to. And part of the metrics that he was talking about, and I'm asking anybody, I guess, on the panel this, I don't know if it was the community spread percentage that was the thing that locked them down. He kept using the number 19, that it needed to be under 19% before they were going to allow the third grade through 12 back in. And I'm not saying it was the community spread number that he was going. I couldn't tell you exactly what it was. It was trending down from July, but it was still something like the upper 40s. And the only reason why I'm assuming that's what it is, because that's where ours are at. And so I'm just wondering if that is the case that realistically shut them down, if that is something that Iowa County would do also. So I guess it's a two-part question. Is that the numbers? Do you remember anything about 19 being a number that Dane County, a school can open up without that or something?
I am not sure what Dane County's guidelines were, or what prompted the Dane County Health Department to shut down all Dane County schools. In talking with Debbie Sigenthaler, they were using 8% as a county, that if our numbers were getting at 8% or higher, then they would start to look at individual schools and see, okay, what does Mineral Point's school district look like if our numbers are down? And quite honestly, only Iowa County is going to have those numbers or have that specific of information. Then they might recommend us going to 100% virtual. And 8% was kind of what they were looking at, where it might trigger a county-wide shutdown to all virtual school. At least that's Iowa County's. That's Iowa County's number.
But that would be the positivity rate.
Right. Okay.
So I'll speak to the 39. Is that what the number? So the 30, there was a 39 number, and that was the cases per day that Dane County should be under for, I believe it was a 4-week period before they could move forward. And that's based on a cases per population per day, which is one of the numbers that Iowa County is tracking. And right now we're at, I think we're at 11.3 cases per 10,000 per day. And I think that 39 pushes Dane County above 20 cases per 10,000 per day, if I'm right. But I would have to look at those numbers exactly. But it was their cases per day was the number that pushed them above that limit. But the test positivity is also a metric that I think the county public health departments are using to determine whether they're at a point where they should be all virtual or not.
Okay, yeah, and I that does sound very familiar, the numbers you're giving me versus what he was. I was trying to figure out what did push them over the edge where that's what it was. And the positivity rate seems to be one that is a glaring thing that they use as a metric that's consistent, at least I see on the TV and stuff all the time. But that other one was not one that I was familiar with. So I just want to understand them all so that I can actually form an opinion on whether or not, you know, how aggressive the numbers matter.
Yeah, and they're close to that 39. They're at 42, I think was the most recent. So they're not too far off from that limit. But what I think is helpful is sometimes using a couple of different metrics to kind of have a composite score, because then you're not, you know, if the test positivity alone is very low, that's great. That probably means you're doing plenty of testing, but your case count may be maybe a little higher because you're doing so much testing. So using one or the other probably doesn't make sense. You probably have to use all those numbers together.
There has been some guidelines coming from the CDC to look at it per 100,000. And I can put together information at how Iowa County is doing. And the number looks extraordinary, but it's because our population for Iowa County is 23,000. You know, you take that basically times 4 to get to this number. And then it compares every county equally. So it kind of takes our number.
Did you guys all lose his audio?
What's that? Am I not coming through?
We can hear you, Mitch. I think
Okay.
might be just you, Kyle.
Okay. So there's a website that and put them in a comparable light. So if our rate is 8% and Richland County's 12%, well, do the number of residents make a difference, or the number of tests that they're doing make a difference? You know, so they're trying to get a level playing field as we come together, you know, and try to make those comparisons.
So I'll just, maybe this might be helpful for committee members to know that we are already collecting some data on the Upland Hills Health side. So aside from the county score, we're using the county score and we're kind of contributing to it and then using some of their numbers. But the way we're tracking the epidemiology of this is with 3 different markers. So one is the percent positivity. So if it's less than 3% positive, which we just dipped under today, we had been between 3 and 5% positive for several weeks. If we're less than 3% positive, if we are doing more than that, I think it's 100 tests per 100,000 per day. And if our case count is below a certain amount per 100,000 per day. So we're already gathering that data and coming up with I've got a point system figured out for it. So we actually have like a daily COVID score that we're calculating on the hospital side. It also takes into account other hospital things that I don't think would necessarily influence how the school would make decisions, but the hospital things we're looking at are things like PPE and hospital capacity and vent availability and staff shortages, things like that. We're also including a marker for whether surrounding counties are in kind of a red zone. So if there's no surrounding counties in a red zone, then we kind of get an extra point for that, because then we know that around us there's not other reservoirs of disease out there. So if it's helpful to committee members, I can share kind of where our data has been the last few weeks of each of those markers, so that we can kind of see where we're trending. The goal of that score is for it to be kind of an early warning system, because it has a marker in there for where our numbers are compared to, so a 5-day average compared to prior 2 weeks. So if we suddenly see a blip, it would reflect in that. And then we're using that data to kind of say what level of services should we be doing, so that we're not using up PPE on elective procedures when we know that there's going to be a surge of patients coming. So we're tracking it over time and using, if we dip down to a lower level with the score where we say, ooh, things are starting to look tight, this is not looking good, then if we do that for 5 days for that lower level, then we downgrade where we're at. And if we have 2 weeks at a better level, then we'll upgrade to that 2 weeks or to that higher level. So we want to make sure that we have, it's not just a blip up where it looks good for a couple of days. It really truly is a trend in that right direction. So if it's helpful for people, I can kind of gather those numbers for the last few weeks and maybe even give, ongoing progress reports with it so that people can kind of see where we're at for the county.
I think that'd be very helpful, especially if the trend lines are included. That seems really important to your point.
Another thing I would add to that, on that Iowa County website, when in the COVID area, they have a breakdown of cases, and they're doing it kind of by age band, and they are working on trying to pull out more information because 0 to 17 doesn't help us very much as a school district, and I would imagine even as far as this committee is concerned. So they're going to try to break that into smaller grade or age bands. So it might be 0 to 5 and 6 to 11 and 12 to 18 or something, so that we get a better picture of what the impact is on school age children in Iowa County. And I can imagine no one would be surprised to know that the highest percentage of people with positive cases are in that just graduated early college age, so kind of right at that peak of invincibility is kind of sitting at that highest level right now. And, as I hear often, you're going to try to limit what the kids can do at school and try to keep the cohorts and keep exposure to a minimum. But when they leave, they hang out with each other. And you're absolutely right. I don't doubt that one bit. However, I'm not everybody's dad, so I don't get to control all of those kinds of things. But that might be just another piece of information that will be helpful to the committee to get kind of how are the schools doing. Anybody that has ever sent their child to school, or Matthew, I'm sure you could speak to this too with yourself or friends, that, once kids come to school, germs don't stay with that individual student. Strep throat, influenza, head lice, you name it, it gets shared. So while I know there was an original concern that Mineral Point was the only one doing a hybrid, I can tell you that we're not the only one doing a hybrid. Other school districts have shifted to that. Other school districts who were going to do more in person are doing less in person, and so on and so forth. So, because we were starting early, we needed a plan in place Dr. Fox spoke to this. I had Dr. Fox and Dr. Dunn, and all of the information I could take from Iowa County, all the information I could get from the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction and the health departments, my administrators, we put together our current plan that we're in. And I'm not saying it's perfect, and I'm sure anybody that was part of that will say it's not perfect, but we're hoping that we can ease into this and continue to educate face-to-face as long as we possibly can, with the hope that we'll bring more students in and not go the other direction. Erica, I know you're in the Dodgeville School District. Would you at least speak to kind of what Dodgeville is doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a school counselor at Dodgeville High School, and we our 4K, we call it ELP, they're coming through 9th grade, are still planning to come 5 days a week in person, or they can go all virtual. Our 10th through 12th originally were coming, they could do all virtual, or they could do a blended model of that. And they could, at the time, as of Tuesday, they were able to come 4 days a week if they could have access to the building at least 4 days a week, with Wednesdays being all virtual. Yesterday then, we did a little bit of a pivot, and now kiddos are going to be coming 2 days. They can have 2 days a week. We're splitting it by alphabet, last name of your last name. So 8 through K is basically going to be coming Tuesday, Friday, or can come Tuesday, Friday. L through Z, I think it's like Monday, Thursdays, or that could be flipped. Either way, Wednesdays will be virtual. So yeah, it's just changes by the minute, and we just gotta roll with it and be flexible, and then try to really model that for the kids too, as they struggle to kind of make sense of it all. So
Thank you. Jane, anything that you'd like to add, being such a longtime veteran now of the Mineral Point School District? And I know that you've had a meeting today, and the school nurses will be meeting with Debbie daily starting next Monday. You know, so I think there, as more schools then start on Tuesday next week, there'll be a lot more sharing. But Jane, is there anything you'd like to kind of add to this?
I don't know if there's any way to prepare our families for the students who are going to be sent home for probably allergies or minor colds. I mean, they're going to be sent home because those are the guidelines we have to follow. And I wish we could think of a way to soften that blow before I get angry feedback. I don't know the best way to communicate that, but I think they should be warned in some way.
I think that's certainly
So
something that can come from the school.
So will kids be sent home even if they don't have a fever?
They'll be sent home if they have a cough. That's
Really?
a no. Yeah, that's kind of a non-negotiable. There's 3 symptoms that they will go home immediately for, and then a combination. So if they have a sore throat and a runny nose, they'll go home. And it's super duper strict. And so it's going to be hard for people to understand. All the teachers are aware of that list. And Iowa County has created a really easy to follow, what do I do if I'm sick, or what do I do if my kid was sick, or, you know, and they tested negative, you know, all these questions, and they're all listed there. They're on the Iowa County website, but I don't think that the families are really aware of how easily these symptoms will send their student home. It doesn't mean that we think they have COVID, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they're out for 2 weeks or 24 days, but we do have to rule out COVID or somehow prove that it's there's, you know, baseline, you know, they've had allergies, you know, for the last month, and this is not different. Or they always have shortness of breath because of asthma. We have to either have a negative COVID test or a doctor's visit or note indicating that this is not new or different or suddenly worse. And I just think that that's going to be a hard thing to understand. And the newest information that I got is that if a student goes home for a symptom, a cough, allergies, or one of those symptoms, their siblings will immediately be sent home as well.
So the symptoms are above.
Sorry.
I was just going to clarify that the symptoms are defined as above baseline. So if somebody, you know, has their, so I don't know, the stuffy nose is the thing that I think of the most. If they have their usual allergy stuffy nose and there's nothing different from that, as long as it's not one of the, so fever is like an automatic disqualifier. Diarrhea, vomiting has always been an automatic disqualifier. So that those are kind of no different from what usual is, but cough, loss of taste or smell are the other 2 major symptoms that they're looking for. And then there's a list of minor symptoms as well. And one thing I looked at, Jane, I can't remember if this was the most recent from DHS, was 2 minor symptoms above baseline or 1 major symptom. And so the minor symptoms, it's like if you have runny nose alone, that doesn't trigger it. But if you have runny nose plus body aches, that would trigger it. So it's the hardest thing is going to be kind of figuring out which, you know, does this kid need to go or not. I'm not totally sold on the sibling part for the symptoms, because I think, you know, that's probably going to be excluding a lot of kids that don't necessarily have any infectious potential. but that was the guy, I heard that same guidance yesterday from public health in a call, that siblings will have to go home, and that was new. I hadn't heard that before yesterday.
I think the problem that I'm most feeling from the other nurses is, do we take a parent's word for it? Oh, this is their normal. Oh, they've had that cough for a month. Oh, it's not worse. They always have this symptom, and our consensus from our meetings is that we can't always take the parent's word for it. We pretty much have to, as a rule, either have a doctor, fax us a letter or confirm that this is not new or different for that student.
So Jane, are you suggesting that we send this out to all the parents so that they're aware that, if they come to you and they get sent home, it's not a shocker to them? Is that kind of where you're?
I'm not sure which document I want to send to parents. I know that every document there's going to be a lot of questions on. I want to somehow let them know. I think I'd have to meet with Mitch and Joelle to figure out what exactly are we sending them. But I do want them to not be surprised when I say, and it's not that they all have to stay home for 10 days. It's just until we get a confirmation from the doctor that, yes, that's normal for that student. So yes, all siblings can go back the next day.
How long does it take for a test results? Like if you got tested today, would it take a few days to get results, or?
Our turnaround right now is pretty good because Exact Sciences has been so helpful with us. Up until about 2 weeks ago, we were looking at a 48 to 96 hour turnaround on tests. And right now, from the time the swab happens till we get results, it's usually about 24 hours. Depends on when the courier leaves though. So our courier on the weekdays leaves at about 2 p.m. And so if it's done before that 2 p.m. mark, then it goes to the lab that day. We have a result the next morning. If it's done after the 2 p.m. courier, and on the weekends that courier leaves at about 10 a.m. So then we may not get results until that following day. So the turnaround time right now is about 24, maybe 36 hours, depending on the courier time.
Are people typically getting the test if they have symptoms, or if they were, near somebody that had it, or?
So people will get tested for 3 different reasons at this point. One is if they're going to be having a surgery or a procedure done, or if they're admitted to the hospital, we test all of those people. So that's regardless of symptoms, regardless of history of exposure. The second is that we test people for symptoms. So somebody, has symptoms that could be COVID, they might be seen in the clinic and sent over for testing, or just sent to the drive-up testing center in Dodgeville. And then the third is for exposure. So if somebody is identified as a close contact by public health, or they call and report and say, I wasn't identified as a close contact by public health, but I was around this guy all day and I think I need a test. Any of those 3 reasons people can get tested for. And it's, I would say probably half of the people are getting tested because of symptoms right now. And then the other half is kind of a split between those asymptomatic pre-surgical or admission to the hospital, or the close contact exposures.
And also one other question on looking at this response protocol. It says if you're not in close, like if somebody in the classroom had it and you're not in close contact, then you can stay in school. Close contact is within 6 feet or 15 minutes or more. It looks like, I think the way everything is set up is so that everybody is 6 feet or further away from each other, right? I mean, so if a child got, tested positive for COVID in a classroom, that doesn't really affect the rest of the classroom unless somebody was defined as close contact. Is that?
Yeah, so this is going to be very tricky because it's 15 minutes of cumulative time. So that's if somebody comes to school and we find out the next day that they have COVID, for example, anybody who had at least 15 minutes of within 6 feet exposure to that person the prior day, or had any direct contact with the patient, like a handshake or a hug, or they sneezed right next to them, that sort of thing. That counts as well. And barriers and masks don't count against that distancing. So in the lunchroom at the middle school and high school, for example, those plexiglass barriers, if you're within 6 feet, you're defined as a close contact. So we have to think about anytime a kid goes up for recess, anytime a kid is sitting across from anybody in the cafeteria, if they're in the bathroom at the same time in the morning, or two staff members talked for 5 minutes in the morning and then had lunch in the same room and maybe were within 6 feet, and then at the end of the day they were talking again, that adds up. So it gets extremely complicated to do contact tracing for a very as much as we try to control, there are all these uncontrolled interactions with people. My personal opinion is that if you have an entire day in a classroom where, say, the room is relatively small, or the doors are closed, or things like that, that's called proximate contact. So it's not defined as close contact of those people that definitely need to be tested, but we know that that increases people's risk, is even if they don't have close contact, that proximate contact may increase their risk. But the big problem, I think, for elementary school kids will be, how do you say that that person didn't have 15 minutes of cumulative exposure to that person unless they're in a totally different cohort? Middle school and high school, you might be able to actually rely on student report of who did you have lunch with, who were you, working with in that classroom, were you within 6 feet, that sort of thing, but just gets very tricky.
It looks like
is there currently, oh, go ahead, Bob.
I was just going to say, on the protocol, it says if you are close contact, it looks like that affects that student more negatively than any of the other. Like if you have a symptom, you don't have to quarantine for 14 days. If you're close contact, you quarantine for 14 days. So I guess, if you're the most conservative, then, and you're in close contact, then you would quarantine the entire class for 14 days. And I guess that's, or maybe not so much the class, but in the cafeteria, if people are eating at the same table, there's 4 per table. And I was thinking the barriers would be fine too. And maybe the school is thinking that too, but so it would actually be safer if they were sitting apart, like in a classroom, 6 feet away.
Yeah, so the barriers, they help with transmission, but it doesn't change the contact tracing definition. And yes, you're right that somebody could be a close contact and be out of school for longer than the person who initially had it in the classroom. The 14 days is after last exposure. So if somebody was, say somebody was in class on Monday, and then got diagnosed on, Tuesday, and the rest of that class would then start that 14-day from Monday. So, for some of these classes that are there 2 days a week and it's split apart, it's not going to be a full 2 weeks out of school. It's going to be hopefully less than that. But the bigger problem, and I think maybe people are not aware of this yet, it's going to be a big reality check, is that siblings are actually, you can't count the end of the infectious period that initial sibling, so say one sibling has it, they start their 10-day of, you have to be out of public places and things like that for 10 days. They're potentially infectious until the end of that 10-day period. The sibling who lives in that same household and all those household members, their quarantine starts on day 10 of the sibling. Yeah, so it's 24 days essentially that person would be out if they don't test positive. So if they end up testing positive, it's a shorter quarantine. There is, if you can truly isolate that initial index case in the house, then that shortens that. So it would start from the last contact you had, but you really have to be very strict about quarantining that or isolating that person in the house. So same would go for like a parent of a child, say they're a teacher. That teacher could potentially be out for 24 days if their kid gets COVID.
Is there currently a protocol for if a child or staff member comes down with COVID, positive test?
Protocol for exclusion?
I mean, within the school district, is the school district decided how they're going to handle positive cases? I've heard talk about it, but I don't know where the school district is right now.
Do you mean like who would be isolated, who would be quarantined, who would be switched to virtual, would a classroom shut down, that sort of thing?
Right.
Yeah, and we do have some of that, and a lot more would come from Iowa County Health. They would be involved. They would contact us and say, we have a positive case. Mr. Wainwright has tested positive, and we now need to do the, contact tracing. Who are his students, who has been in his classroom? Kind of look at who's been within the 6 feet, all of those kinds of things. So Iowa County would help provide a lot of direction when it comes to those things, but we would follow that 14-day quarantine and all of those protocols in place as well.
So are the counties sharing best practices as well? Do they have access to the positivity rates of other counties and talking to each other, asking, hey, what's working well, what isn't?
Counties are sharing data and talking.
Okay.
Yeah, so the problem, the county was really hoping that the DHS, the state recommendations for the schools was going to have more specific criteria for when you should close a classroom, when you should close a school, and they did not make specific recommendations on that. So it's up to each county to figure it out, and up to, honestly, each school district to figure it out. So there's the local counties, especially Lafayette, Grant, and Iowa County, and then also Richland and Sauk have frequent conversations with each other. Dane County, being so large, it's really just kind of a different beast, but the smaller counties are in very close contact with each other. But like I said, everybody's doing something different. And even in Iowa County, there's so many different models for how these school districts are responding to this. And so it's hard to even put together what the response should be, because the response might be different for a school that's going 5 days a week full in person and doesn't have the ability to distance within a classroom, versus a school district like ours that has fewer kids in the classroom and can distance. Maybe that's a different response that way.
I guess I'll add to that to try to cover a couple of different corners here. So as the staff member on here, immediately I realized I was the only one. And I was concerned about Mr. Carey's advice and opinion as a teacher here, and not getting, because me as a tech ed teacher is very different than a science teacher at the high school level on a core, which is also very different than the middle school level, and also very different from the elementary school level. So I reached out to as many as I could, and I've been on phone calls and talks like crazy to try to make sure that I can represent to the best of my ability all of my colleagues. I'm still sure that I can't do that 100%. But that being said, a couple of things that rang true across the board, and that was at the elementary level all the way up through here, that the model that Mr. Austin and Mr. Wainwright put together that we started here over the past 2 days, and I recognize it's only 2 days, the staff itself in general feels extremely safe with this scenario. We are able to do the 6 feet relatively well. The kids at the high school level, and what I'm hearing at the elementary school level and middle school, are working with the masks really well. So those things are working pretty well for us. And I can honestly tell you that 3 days ago, I felt like I was starting my first year of school again, and I've been teaching for 15 years. And I would say I had more anxiety about that than I did 15 years ago. That said, the last 4 days have gone really well compared to what I was concerned about previously. And I can't say that to every teacher that they all agree with that, but the vast majority would say, if we're talking about safety and we're talking about the masks and we're talking about the health reasons, not the education side of it, but purely on the safety aspect, I'm pretty confident I can speak that across the board that they're pretty happy. There's a couple of different hiccups here and there, and we'll work them out. But in general, that's where they're at. If we're talking about the education side of it, I also will tell you that I don't think you're going to find a teacher that's not going to agree that 5 days a week isn't the best educational thing we can do. So, if people are, saying the hybrid model is the best model, and a teacher saying that too, they're typically not coming from the education standpoint of it. They're coming from it, this is the best we can do with what we got scenario. Because I bet if you ask them, can you teach the exact same way and as good, most will say, no, 5 days a week, I can be a better teacher with that. So just so that everybody's aware that that's typically what you're going to get from a staff member, that's the case. Now, again, it's not all the case. Sometimes they'll say, I can take this class and do virtually quite well, and then I'm hearing actually a lot from the hybrid, particularly on the core side at the high school level, that they are pretty happy with the amount that they're able to do with this hybrid model. Again, it's not across the board. So I just thought I'd throw those things out because I did an extensive amount of talking with a whole conglomerate of staff members to try to get a decent representation of everybody. So.
And I can also speak to that as a student. I mean, I felt like my day, I went in on Tuesday for the hybrid, and I feel like it went very well with social distancing, and I only saw masks come off obviously at lunch and on mask breaks, and social distancing was maintained throughout the whole day. And I didn't realize this, but once I got home, on a normal school day, I would see a lot of people, but I really, outside of my cohort, I only saw a few other people when I was at lunch or at the bus stop. So I feel like managing the social distancing and masks did go really well from my side of things on my in-person day.
Good, Matt, because I was going to ask you how it went for you when you were here. So thank you for sharing that. Maggie, I don't know if you want to share kind of the virtual side and what your experience has been like.
Well, I would say it has been incomplete so far. Our teacher gave us a heads up that it would be pretty loose this week while they spent a lot of time kind of reteaching children how to be in the school environment. There's a lot of procedural stuff they have to get through. I think that his contact with the teachers with his teacher will increase, and that'll be good. I would say that the jury's still out though. I have full faith in the staff at the elementary school. I have no concern that they won't work it out, but this week has been, on the virtual side, it's been not extremely rigorous, which isn't a complaint, just a acknowledgement.
And I would probably say most staff would echo that too, because it's back to school and it's here's how I expect you to do things. Here's where you turn in homework. It's all of that stuff that the staff really don't want to do, but they need to do it right out of the gate. But it will be very important for us in the school to know if it does not ramp up, because we need to make adjustments here to make sure that the virtual experience, and that's one of the things the board is really interested in, is that virtual experience worthwhile? Is it academically challenging? Is it meeting the students where they are and helping them grow? Because that will factor into how we move forward.
I also am becoming to understand, hearing what Jane had to say, that there might be more kids on virtual than originally anticipated once kids are sent home. I imagine they'll be jumping on as virtual only students. So that's an interesting kind of wrinkle in this that I'm sure you guys have thought of, but I hadn't really gotten that far in my brain yet. So I also am reaching out to other families who are doing virtual only to let them know I'm on this committee. So if you all hear from a virtual only parent who wants to, I don't know, talk, I guess if you know them, they can talk to you, but I'm available if that's something that's useful for anybody.
I think that brings me to a perfect point or perfect transition as to how you see your role. And I guess kind of looking at it as, okay, I have a middle school child. So, maybe my cohort of mothers and fathers that I talk to are in that middle school and try to get the perspective of what those families are feeling, how it's going with the hybrid model or how it's going all virtual for them or vice versa. Does it seem like, boy, everything's getting piled on my child on Monday when they're here, and then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, there's nothing. So that experience is not good. It's not very good educationally for my child or for the children at this level, or it is 100% virtual. Or, you know, Matthew, you'll probably have the toughest job because you'll talk to your classmates and schoolmates and you'll get the proverbial, well, this sucks. And then you'll have to really dig down into why does it suck and how can it be better? And can you tell me more about it? So you probably have the toughest job of all of us. But it is to kind of gather information for Kyle, from other teachers. How are they feeling? You know, what do they see? What's going well? What are they having problems with? And from all of you, if I have elementary children, or I have virtual children, or I have high school children, these are issues that we're seeing, so that it addresses the educational piece. And then I come back again to do I provide enough information, or is there more information you would like to get to help us as we move forward? You know, I know one of the things that the school board said is what's happening in other school districts around us. You know, I know my wife teaches in Dodgeville as well, you know, so she's over there where Erica is, and they have moved grade levels so that they can try to do a better job social distancing. Some of the upper elementary school kids have are now going to go to school in the middle school. Middle school kids are going to go and attend at the high school to try to separate students and try to give some more of that spacing. Other schools are, and I'll be honest with you, I meet with superintendents on a regular basis as well, and they're all, yep, our board has voted, we're all in, everybody every day, and we know it's not if, it's a matter of when. Again, because you're bringing all these people together, and you know, if it's the common cold, it makes its way through a building. If it's strep throat, it makes its way through a classroom. They're all of the mindset that yes, they will be impacted and they will have to go 100% virtual at some point in time. So I don't know if there's other information that I can try to provide, or that I can try to get information, or that maybe somebody else on the committee can provide that will help us and guide us as we move forward and try to make decisions around, well, it seems like the numbers are going in the right direction. Maybe this is the right time for us to make a change. And before I turn it over and say, yeah, that's going to be tomorrow, please understand that the school won't be able to respond that quickly either. We would want to give our families time, our parents time, and the building time to be able to prepare for whatever would come next as well. So I turn it back, or if there's things that people think they would need or would help this process.
Well, Go ahead. Is it Amy? Go ahead.
Yeah, this is Amy. I just, I was in with a patient and came back and caught just a little bit, but so I'm not sure what was all going on. I know Belmont is doing a live streaming of the classroom of the teacher talking. And so I do like that model. Yes, it's going to take extra internet data and stuff, but just in the first 3 days of nothingness as far as virtual, because my kids were virtual the first 3 days, and Hunter had, being in third grade, had 45 minutes of a Zoom meeting, and that was it for 3 days of education. And my daughter had maybe 45 minutes worth of stuff for the first 2 days. And I understand this is the first week and nothing's been prepared, which is a disheartening thing to the kids. But if a kid does get quarantined for 14 days because they're having symptoms, and now they need to switch from going virtual to going in class, it gets really hard. So if we could have the teachers teach like normal and our kids sit in front of the screen and have actual education, I'd be game for that. But and that's what Belmont's doing. So then if my kid were quarantined, then I would just say, okay, then you're home, but you're still at school, and they're not missing out on education, where otherwise, what are we really doing, and is what we're doing enough? I don't think it is right now. And so I'm really at odds with what do I do with my kids, you know, because I was informed that this virtual thing, this year right now when we're starting was going to be different than fall, and the first 3 days has been worse than this fall, or not, because the Zoom didn't work on Monday and then we had no direction. And so I, as a parent, feel that that we need to do something more. That's something that the kids can do, that their teacher then would be available. They could ask a question just like we're asking a question here. But my daughter was in tears on Tuesday because she didn't know what to do on IXL to do the math problems that she was being asked to do. And so, fine, I'm teaching her how to do math my way. I don't know as if that's what you guys want or not. And I quite honestly am not a teacher. And so I taught her how to do the problems the way I was taught how to do it. And so you know, you're going to have a lot of different kids getting, you know, ad hoc learning in how many different ways, unless we can unify it somehow. And so I don't know, but I am not a big fan of what happened for the first 3 days. And I am highly considering alternate education options for my kids that would be reasonable, or they could get a full education.
That's good to know. Thank you.
What grade is your daughter in? Is she elementary school or?
My daughter is in 5th grade and my son is in 3rd grade.
And, you know, I was thinking about that too. I mean, my daughter's a senior right now, but I have employees who have younger kids too. And I think the families that have the toughest times are the ones that are in elementary school right now. And I believe it's 4K is in the building 4 days a week, and then is it kindergarten to 5th grade is 2 days a week or something maybe?
Correct.
So, I mean,
yeah.
Yeah. So they get a little bit more exposure than like high school, which is 1. And I think I mean, from high school anyway, with Chloe, it seems like that's working a lot better than it did last year. I think she had 6 Zoom things on Wednesday, which, you know, didn't happen last spring. So there's a lot more planning that was done, and you know, they're more independent, high school kids are, but the elementary school, you know, I'm sure you guys hear the same thing, it's a little bit more difficult. But when my kids were in elementary school, it would have been nice when I helped with their homework if I actually had like a teacher's manual, figure out, you know, where you go with this. I don't know what you want, because I'm just, you know, getting in at the last minute here. I don't really know what they're trying to teach them, but I don't know if that is something that, you know, the teacher can give like a key or something to the parents to make it not like the parents are the student, but the parent becomes the teacher. In a lot of situations, I mean, the worksheets, if you just had the answers, you're going to have to try to figure it out yourself. But anyway, that's kind of my 2 cents too, as far as my feedback that I've heard anyway on the teaching is just the younger kids as a family, you know, especially with Steph, sounds like she's a single mom with elementary school kid, and there's a lot of pressure on them to, you know, how do they manage the workload and stuff. And I know that's not school's responsibility, but maybe there's, you know, a conduit through the school that can kind of help some of those parents in those situations.
Mitch, can you speak to, I think that we talked about having that live cast for teachers, and there were some privacy concerns. Was that right?
There are some things with recording a class. If you record a class, it becomes an educational record. Live streaming is a little bit easier. And I won't say it on this committee meeting because then you'll all hold it against me, but there are still some privacy rights for students. If we have a student with an IEP and the aide walks in and both of those happen to walk in front of the camera, oh, I know Mitch has an IEP and his aide is Mr. Carey's mom. So that basically violated my rights as a student. So there are some issues with us trying to make sure we set up cameras in such a way that don't show those kinds of things. And I know teachers are struggling a little bit with that. But to Amy's point, I know some staff at the high school level are live streaming, and at the elementary, I will check into this, but at the elementary, there was supposed to be someone who was responsible for the virtual teaching, because we were able to divide the groups up and we added additional staff. Some of the specials are helping out in the classroom with other things. So I can certainly look into what's going on and try to ramp that virtual experience up more at all levels. I'm not trying to point fingers anywhere either, but we can certainly do a better job with providing the best education we can.
I wanted to offer another perspective on virtual only. The feedback I've gotten and the conversation I've had with our teacher is that it's kind of the opposite track of live streaming, and that is trying to make the screen time that the kids are having at home like as efficient as possible. I don't really think it's going to be very useful for Gus to like sit and, you know, watch a class and the class functioning. So we've really been trying to figure out when he can call in, and even having her text us like when it's time, when it's actually time, because the schedule is still so kind of unknown, because they don't really know how long it's going to take to move around the school, to transition from one activity to another. Like the schedule is just so kind of unknown. So that's kind of just just a different perspective or a different kind of feedback. And I would say the one frustration that I've heard from virtual families is that having all the virtual students split up between classes, I would think there was an expectation that the virtual kids would be put into one class so that they could take advantage of those times when they're not live with the school and kind of get onto a Zoom call together. But now they're really spread out throughout the whole school. And I think that's the only frustration point that constructive frustration point that I've heard thus far.
Okay.
I can also add.
I have a fifth grader also, and I wish Amy didn't walk out, but I'm speaking as a parent now, not as a staff member. My experience was way different than Amy's, but there was a big difference in the fact that from what she just said, she was virtual the first 2 days. My son was there the first 2 days, which would make it a complete difference in the sense that he had 2 days in with the teacher to learn everything they needed to do. And then today was Wednesday and Thursday was virtual. So I would understand that the frustration of going on the virtual side first and trying to learn the ins and outs first might also be part of that frustration. I was hoping I could actually ask her that. So I hope it's different in the future now that her child is likely there Thursday and Friday and they can get those hiccups up. But inevitably those things will happen at the beginning as well.
And I can
Annika?
also definitely say that with how it's gone for me. So I was virtual on Monday and then in person on Tuesday and back to virtual. Monday, there was not a lot of stuff. I did have a Zoom meeting and it was a lot of taking information, piecing it together, and, what do I have to do? When do I have to do these things? But then Tuesday, it was just it was a good experience getting everything in a line so that I know my responsibilities and what I do have to do. So now coming back to virtual on Wednesday and Thursday, it's a lot more orderly and I know when I have all of my Zooms, and I do have a lot more Zoom meetings and interactions with teachers. So having that one day in person to get everything set up and so that I know what to do on Classroom, that really does help.
And I would say the same thing. My kids, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I forgot to mention my kids are doing the hybrid. I have 2 in middle school, 2 in elementary school. I also have a 5th grader. We had a really good experience my 2 elementary kids went on Monday and Tuesday, and then they did virtual today. And my 5th grader had 2 scheduled Zooms. So he had one at 8:45 where they taught a lesson, assigned an assignment, and then gave him time to work on it. And then he had another Zoom at 11:30 with the same format. They taught a lesson, gave him time to work on it. I mean, obviously my children would rather be at school in person. But I didn't feel like they didn't get anything out of it. I felt like it was very structured, and, of course it's the first week, so we're all adapting and we're all getting used to how things are going to be. But I thought that it was manageable, and I felt like I would have to say that there were definitely more meetings and more things assigned. And I think the expectations were higher, now than say in the spring. And obviously the spring was hard because no one had time to prepare for that. So our experience was good so far. And again, like Matthew said, I think it is, I also have an 8th grader. It is nice to do an in-person check-in. This is what I need to do. And I'm encouraging my kids to communicate. Like that's one of the best parts about this, is that the teachers seem very available. And if you have an issue or if you need something, I'm putting it on them, because especially my middle schoolers, they have to solve problems. And this is a good way to communicate and figure this stuff out if they do have an issue. So anyway, that's my feedback as a parent.
And I just wanted to add, as a another full virtual mom of a kindergartner, really echo Maggie's sentiments that it has been a pretty great experience for us with a little 5-year-old who has picked up tech skills that are better than my colleagues. So I think I'm very impressed with just the tech, like the etiquette and knowing how to mute and unmute and raise your hand. And I've been just blown away that a 5-year-old can adapt that quickly and learn things that I've been working on months with my peers. So we've had a really great experience thus far. Really short days so far, but I guess that's my expectation of a kindergartner, is I really don't want an all day sitting at a screen. Like we're going to supplement at home. And I think that is our job as parents, is to be there to really supplement their education. So we've been really pleased with the virtual, fully virtual option for the kindergartners.
So I would go to basically our last agenda item, and that is to elect a chairperson for the committee. And I would assume that the chairperson then would also be that lucky volunteer that will be able to attend board meetings and kind of report out kind of the progress, some of the discussions, some of the information that's coming out of the committee, and kind of where we are, where we're going, and what direction, what information you might want additionally. I'm sure they'll probably have a lot of questions. Did you consider this? Did you consider that? So I would look for you to basically elect a chairperson that will be also that spokesperson. That being said, it can't be me, it can't be Mr. Austin, and it can't be Jane Lindsay. We're not necessarily part of the committee to give recommendations. We're here to try to provide resources and answers for questions that might come along. So I don't know if you have a strong feeling that there is someone that you think, boy, this should be our chairperson and spokesperson.
I'd be up for the opportunity to do it.
Then do we just need a second? Is that all we need to do then?
I'm also happy to, as an epidemiologist and a public health scholar, I'm very comfortable in speaking to these numbers that the group would bring together.
And I believe, Maggie, if my memory is right, there were actually co-chairs on the building committee, on the elementary building committee. So if there's no objections, we could have co-chairs so that if one can't make the meeting and the other one could. It's certainly a possibility.
There was, and we definitely had different skill sets. So that's also sounds like what we might have going on here too, with you too.
Any objections to Justin and Annika serving as co-chairs? Hearing none, congratulations. You know, it's kind of, I joke with people, you know, I don't know if any of you remember, it was the mannequin game, you know, where all of a sudden you just froze whatever you're doing. I sat in a lot of administrative meetings where they were looking for volunteers, and I claimed to have invented the mannequin game because I could freeze. I could even slow my heart rate down so that no one would even think that my heartbeat was a volunteer to be part of an extra committee. So thank you both very much. I guess one of the things then before we adjourn tonight's meeting, and I am recording these through Zoom, so they will be available. Another meeting date, or a next meeting date, I guess. Do you wish to meet once a month? Do you wish to meet more than once a month? As a committee, I would allow you to make that decision.
I'm going to inject just a little bit here. I'm going to propose once a month, and my reasoning is this. As I went around to the staff trying to get information I could with them, immediately every single one of them had this huge anxiety because they looked at me like, why are you asking all these questions to try to change what we just started and it's day 2? You know, so complete anxiety, and they were freaking out about answering any type of question for that reason, because obviously we want to get this ball rolling, and we don't want to change it super fast. That being said, like I said before, all teachers want the students in the seat 5 days a week, and that's what the whole committee's attempting to do, is bring back as many kids as we can safely so that it works for everybody. So I think if we're doing it really quick, I'm going to have a hard time getting the anxiety level of the staff thinking we're going to change every, 2 weeks and something like that. I'm just throwing that out there. You guys can obviously choose more or less, but that would be my recommendation.
Is there a time by which we need to report back to the school board?
They would certainly like a report at each monthly meeting. Now, they had also said, if need be, they would have special meetings, but certainly at the next board meeting, and the next scheduled board meeting is September 14th. So I don't know that you would want to meet. I don't know what would drive a decision between now and September 14th that you would say, yeah, we better have another meeting somewhere in that window, but maybe shortly after the board meeting, at some point in time. But I know they would like monthly updates.
I think getting data of how this plan is working for the next month would be useful. It seems like it's pretty solid. I mean, the only thing would be what Sarah said about the separators. Like if you're at lunch, you're within 6 foot of somebody for over 15 minutes, then you're kind of close contact and then potential quarantine. So, but that's the only hole that I see could potentially be worked on. But
I will also say that I was asked by Matt Renwick today. The cafeteria is pretty sad at the elementary school. They're spaced apart and facing one direction. It looks a little depressing in there. Also, because of the space constraints, they're having to rush kids through their eating. So some of the teachers have requested whether we could have dividers at the elementary school. And I said, it's reasonable to do that. But I think you need to kind of make it a stable cohort. So maybe have them sit in same kids on either side of them if they do have the dividers, or across from them, rather than having a different kid every day that they would sit by. While the dividers don't change the need to quarantine, it does decrease the transmission of the virus. So it's helpful for that reason. And if it helps kids be able to get through a day where they have to wear a mask and social distance the rest of it, that amount of exposure is probably tolerable in terms of risk. So I don't think that I don't have any problem with the use of the dividers in the middle school and high school for lunch. And I think it's probably a good idea for the elementary school too, just because it will give you that extra, they have some more time to eat. The teachers get a little bit longer of a break, and it makes the rest of the day a little bit more tolerable for everybody. But yeah, I would say a month I would agree that I don't think we need to meet before the next school board meeting. But in about a month, I think we'll know a lot more, and a lot of other schools will have opened in our area, and we'll have probably a lot different numbers at that point. The other thing that somebody pointed out to me today that I hadn't really thought about in terms of our risk is the Iowa County Fair happening in, I don't know, what, 8 days, something like that. And how the different schools that have already started and have their different plans, all those kids are going to be kind of mixing and mingling and then going back out to their schools. So that a month from now is essentially 2 weeks after that exposure. And I think we'll have, some data at that point. If we're going to have a surge or an outbreak, that would be a really big trigger for a surge or outbreak. So a meeting month from now, I'd be good with.
Is the goal of the next meeting going to be start to look at what metrics this committee decides to focus on to give the board directive in the future? Is that kind of where we're going to go with, where we start to decide? And obviously I'm going to lean towards the health experts on what those metrics are and where the numbers need to be. But is that kind of our goal, to us decide where Mineral Point's levels of what different numbers need to be?
I think we're certainly going to want to look at those numbers to help guide us, because those are going to represent, if not specific to Mineral Point itself, we will certainly have some information that, I can't say that, yeah, you know what, Matthew Gannon went home yesterday and he's got the virus because they told me that. I can't share that, but I can share that, yes, we are now aware of 2 positive cases or 4 positive cases within our school district. Iowa County will share that information, Jane and most likely myself. But we can also look at, county information. We can look at neighboring school districts, because we know, especially our high school students, don't necessarily stay separated from each other, and, friends in Dodgeville, and we have cross country that is going to be happening or is happening. And we have mineral that are over there practicing right now, and they'll be competing, and there'll be boys soccer that's going to take place. And that's another co-op. So, we already know there are some other areas that we're going to interact with that will work its way back into our building in some capacity. But I also think part of what they're wanting to know is, how is the hybrid working for the education? Being able to relate, my student is really falling behind. The teachers don't seem to be able to make the connections with students, whether it's 100% virtual or on their virtual days when they're not in the building. So I think we want to make sure we're collecting even all of that data too. And yes, we'll look at Iowa County numbers, we'll look at Mineral Point numbers to the best of our ability, but we want to make sure that we're also focusing in on that education and delivery and is it working or is it not working?
Do you have enough physical space to actually increase the number of days, though? Like in the elementary school, I know kind of almost at capacity now, aren't you, as far as days that can be added?
Our ability to try to implement as many of the recommendations, we're pretty close to that capacity now. We might have to do some different things at the middle school and high school as far as what the schedule might look like. But, I shared with the school board at the last meeting the film footage that the young lady took in the Georgia school district of that hallway, of the kids walking down the hallway and, shoulder to shoulder and no masks on. I said, well, not the same volume. Mineral Point has that same issue. If we were all 200 and plus high school students and 175 middle school students in, when it's time exchanging and kids walking around and going to a locker and passing, we have those same issues. We have traffic flow issues. You know, we're not 1,000 people in our high school, you know, but right now we have the ability to try to maintain as much social distancing as we can. That's kind of why we brought forward this recommendation for this hybrid, but we might, and I say we might because I'm not the guy that's going to end up doing it, be able to adjust some schedules to bring in a second grade level. But we run into issues of some teachers teach freshmen and sophomores, others teach freshmen and juniors, and how do we combine and which classes do we bring at the same time? Mr. Austin, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I can speak into that. I've actually started looking at that and started putting those groups together for, like, I'm going to call it phase 2 of what the high school would look like. It would be a little bit bigger groups. We're talking probably instead of 10 people, you're talking 15 to 17 people in a group, somewhere in that range. But I can tell you right now, I've started working on, we've kind of grouped together seniors and freshmen because of the differences in teachers. But we're looking at how do we get them there 2 days a week. And Mr. Carey and I have talked a couple times about this too. Is it more like a block schedule? So a day 1, day 2, elective core? Is it more just, can we fit it all in? I can tell you most of my days will be spent getting that ready because I want to be back into phase 2 as soon as possible. I do agree with Kyle that obviously we want to keep a schedule and something consistent for students because I think that's what they need right now more than anything is a consistency, and, you know, keep them in a rotation, get them used to a schedule. But I am looking at that phase 2 as we speak. So.
Well, Matt, if you end up going to block scheduling, we've always been a traditional 4x4 block in Dodgeville, and this summer we just redid and went to an alternating block. So.
Okay, well, that's good to know. I didn't know that.
Scheduling knowledge. If you, I'm happy to send me an email and call me anytime.
I will definitely be reaching out that way. I actually student taught there, so I know what the regular student or block was, but yeah, that's something that we've talked. Mr. Carey is very much in favor of being a tech ed teacher, doing a block type of schedule.
I've been in favor of block for 14 years.
I think the reality is we have to look at all possibilities. Our goal is to get more kids back in the building as soon as we possibly can, but that is going to take some time and energy. It took, you know, a couple weeks to get the first round kind of figured out, and we still had some little hiccups over the week, but everything seems to be going pretty well. And from what I've heard from kids, from what I've heard from teachers, it's been a good transition at the high school level, and middle school level sounds like that too. So I think, Bob, that hopefully answers your question.
I would ask anybody with really good, solid connections. Of course, the week that Mineral Point starts school, we have to have temperatures above 90 and heat index, you know, pushing 100. And of course, the first day we have school, Zoom has a nationwide issue. So the format that we're using to connect with our virtual students has glitches and issues. So it's like, yeah, that was kind of like the perfect storm. You know, and then at the elementary school, they have construction on the north side of the building. So you don't want to open up windows there. And, you know, if it was going to go bad and go wrong, it certainly did. But my hat's off to the staff, too, for doing a great job of adjusting and trying to provide that as best education as we possibly can. So I'm hearing meeting in a month's time. Is a Thursday night, does that work for everybody? Is there a better night? Is there a better time of the day? I know Amy works on Thursdays. You know, she's been able to jump in and out of meetings with us, and I can reach out to her, but is there a date or a day and time that works better, or is this the best we can do?
I thought this worked well.
Yeah, I like this Thursday, or the Thursdays at 6 works good.
Fine by me.
Good with me.
Kind of seems to get I seem to be getting nods from most people. So if we look at calendar, about a month from now would be the 24th of September. So should we plan on that? September 24th at 6 p.m.?
Mitch, I do have in there that on my school calendar here, we got the homecoming parade. I know everything's up in the air. I'm just saying that is at 6 o'clock on that day.
I can tell you it's not going to happen. I've already had a chance to talk with Vicki Dahl. That would probably be our first, if we're playing football, if we get to that point, that would be the first week. That won't be homecoming. So I think we're okay with not worrying about a homecoming parade. I can work with Annika and Justin about an agenda for the next meeting and any kind of resources. You all have my email address. If there are questions that you have, you can shoot them either to Annika or Justin, or you can shoot them to myself. Matt, Jane, and I will try to track down as much information as we can. Again, any thoughts that come up after the meeting, please don't wait till September 24th, because if you're anything like me, I have this idea, question right after the meeting, and then in an hour from now, I won't remember what my question was. So please don't hesitate to ask. Anything else anybody would like to share? Aaron and Jody, you guys have really kind of monopolized tonight's meeting by talking all the time. So maybe next time, so much, okay?
I will just echo again, please reach out. Let us know how things are going. Because the system is not perfect. We know that, but we're willing to obviously adjust and whatnot. But please reach out to the principals, Mr. Carey, anybody, ask questions, because I'm sure there's things that we will come across that we haven't even thought of yet. So please reach out, ask questions though. We appreciate it.
I'm going to echo that, and specifically Maggie and Annika with full virtual students. I have obviously a few full virtual as well. They're the most difficult for me to be confident that I'm giving them what they need. So the more interaction I can get with you as the parent, and I know I'm at a different level at the high school, the better. The more confident I get that I can deliver something to your child that works, because everybody's in a different scenario at home kind of a thing. So I'm sure the elementary school is the same level. When we get to see the kids, we can adjust that a little bit better and know. So always the full virtuals, the ones that I not struggle with, just the one I worry about the most, that I'm not doing enough for them. But I think every teacher wants that. And the more you can reach out to them, the better, with those specific Zoom meetings and even phone calls or late night emails. It doesn't really matter, but just the more communication we can get, the better.
Regarding the full virtual, can we expect that full virtual be an option for the entire school year? Or is that something that would?
Yeah, until I confidently, if I could say this, and Dr. Fox and Annika and Amy could probably echo the sentiment, until there's a known vaccination that would prevent it, I would probably say with a lot of confidence that virtual will be an option throughout this school year.
Because we're looking at like a widespread vaccination and potentially a cure for the people that are dying from it, or the wonder drug or whatever it might be, which I'm guessing is going to be a ways off. I don't know if you've heard anything, Sarah, about potential vaccination, but are they expecting it probably won't be until next summer before?
The word I heard this morning, or I guess today in our incident command team from emergency management, is that the need for mass vaccine clinics for COVID wouldn't be until at least February. So that means that they wouldn't have large amounts of vaccine to deliver to communities until February, at least for our area. That would be the earliest. So there may be pockets of immunization that, say, healthcare workers could get or things like that. And there is no likelihood that this is going to be anything to the point where we don't have to worry about it. I would say until next summer is when I'm hopeful for. So I would say the entirety of the school year is going to be affected by this in some way. And we will have a lot more data about, you know, how young kids spread it, maybe, you know, higher risk exposures and lower risk exposures, and why some people are vulnerable and why some other people are not vulnerable. But we're not going to be in any better place in terms of a wide scale community risk until, I would say, next summer.
Any other questions or thoughts before we adjourn our first meeting?
I just want to say thank you. And I didn't say too much throughout the whole meeting, but it was a lot of information. Been kind of following along with school board meetings and as well as public health. And so it was nice to hear people's feedback more locally, and look forward to kind of what our next steps might be. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. All right, thank you, everyone. I will get out a calendar invite for everybody for the September 24th. Justin and Annika, I'll be in touch with you guys then, talk about the upcoming board meeting and trying to put together an agenda for the next meeting then, all right? All right, thanks everyone. Have a good night.
Thanks everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.